Namaste, Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 4, The Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 2, Text 32. Tad Brahma Paramam Sudham Satam Vartma Sanhatanam Vigarhya Yata Pasandam Daivambo Yatra Bhutarat. By blaspheming the principles of the Vedas, which are the pure and supreme path of the saintly persons, certainly you followers of Bhutapati, Lord Śiva, will descend to the standard of atheism without a doubt. Purport. Lord Śiva is described here as Bhutarat. The ghosts and those who are situated in the material mode of ignorance are called Bhutas. So Bhutarat refers to the leader of the creatures who are in the lowest standard of the material modes of nature. Another meaning of Bhuta is anyone who has taken birth or anything which is produced. So in that sense, Lord Śiva may be accepted as the father of this material world. Here, of course, Bhrigu Muni takes Lord Śiva as the leader of the lowest creatures. The characteristics of the lowest class of men have already been described. They do not bathe, they do not have long hair on their heads, and they are addicted to intoxicants. They do not bathe, they have long hair on their heads, and they are addicted to intoxicants. In comparison with the path followed by the followers of Bhutarat, the Vedic system is certainly excellent, for it promotes people to spiritual life as the highest eternal principle of human civilization. If one decries or blasphemes the Vedic principles, then he falls to the standard of atheism. 33. Maitreya uvacha tasyaivam bharata sapam rigosa bhagavan bhava nischakramha tata kinchid Vimana Eva Sanuga. The sage Maitreya said, when such cursing and counter-cursing was going on between Lord Shiva's followers and the parties of Dakṣa and Bhrigu, Lord Shiva became very morose. Not saying anything, he left the arena of the sacrifice followed by his disciples. Purport. Here, Lord Shiva's excellent character is described. In spite of the cursing and counter-cursing between the parties of Dakṣa and Śiva, because he is the greatest Vaishnava, he was so sober that he did not say anything. A Vaishnava is always tolerant, and Lord Śiva is considered the topmost Vaishnava. So his character, as shown in this scene, is excellent. He became morose because he knew that these people, both his men and Dakṣa's, were unnecessarily cursing and counter-cursing one another, without any interest in spiritual life. From this point of view, he did not see anyone as lower or higher because he is a Vaishnava. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 5.18, Pandita Samadarshina. Pandita Samadarshina. One who is perfectly learned does not see anyone as lesser or greater, because he sees everyone from the spiritual platform. Thus, the only alternative left to Lord Śiva was to leave in order to stop his follower, Nandishvar, as well as Bhrigu Muni, from cursing and counter-cursing in that way. Text 34. Tepi Vishvashrajasatram Sahasra Parivatsaram Samvidhaya Maheshvasa Yatreja Bhohari. The sage Maitreya continued, O Vidura, all the progenitors of the universal population thus executed a sacrifice for thousands of years. For sacrifice is the best way to worship the Supreme Lord, Hare, the personality of Godhead. Purport. It is clearly stated here that the stalwart personalities who generate the entire population of the world are interested in satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead by offering sacrifices. The Lord also says in Bhagavad Gita 5.29, Bhoktaram yagya tapasam. One may engage in performing sacrifices and severe austerities for perfection, but they are all meant to satisfy the Supreme Lord. If such activities are performed for personal satisfaction, one is involved in pashanda, or atheism. But when they are performed for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, one is following the Vedic principle. All the assembled sages perform sacrifices for 1,000 years. Text 35. Aplutya pratam yatra Ganga Yamuna Yanvita Virajenatmana Sarve Svam Svam Dhamaya Yushtata. My dear Vidura, carrier of bows and arrows, all the demigods who were performing the sacrifice took their bath at the confluence of the Ganges and the Yamuna after completing the yajna performance. Such a bath is called Avabrita Snana. Avabrita Snana. After thus becoming purified in the heart, they departed for their respectful abodes. For their respective abodes. Purport. After Lord Śiva and previously Dakṣa left the arena of the sacrifice was not stopped. The sages went on for many years in order to satisfy the Supreme Lord. The sacrifice was not destroyed for want of Śiva and Dakṣa, and the sages went on with their activities. In other words, it may be assumed that if one does not worship the demigods, even up to Lord Śiva and Brahma, one can nevertheless satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.20. Kamaistaistar pratar jnana prapadyantenya devata. Persons who are impelled by lust and desire go to the demigods to derive some material benefit. Bhagavad Gita uses the very specific words nasti buddhi, meaning persons who have lost their sense of intelligence. Only such persons care for demigods and want to derive material benefit from them. Of course, this does not mean that one should not show respect to the demigods, but there is no need to worship them. One who is honest may be faithful to the government, but he does not need to bribe the government servants. Bribery is illegal. One does not bribe a government servant, but that does not mean that one does not show him respect. Similarly, one who engages in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord does not need to worship any demigod, nor does he have any tendency to show disrespect to the demigods. Elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita 9.23, it is stated, Ye pyanya devata bhakta yajante shraddhayanvita. The Lord says that anyone who worships the demigods is also worshiping him, but he is worshiping avidhi purvakam, which means without following the regulative principles. The regulative principle is to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Worship of the demigods may indirectly be worship of the personality of Godhead, but it is not regulated. By worshiping the Supreme Lord, one automatically serves all the demigods because they are parts and parcels of the whole. If one supplies water to the root of a tree, all the parts of the tree, such as the leaves and branches, are automatically satisfied. And if one supplies food to the stomach, all the limbs of the body, the hands, legs, fingers, etc., are nourished. Thus, by worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can satisfy all the demigods. But by worshiping all the demigods, one does not completely worship the Supreme Lord. Therefore, worship of the demigods is irregular, and it is disrespectful to the scriptural injunctions. In this age of Kali, it is practically impossible to perform the Deva Yajna, or sacrifices to the demigods. As such, in this age, Srimad Bhagavatam recommends Sankirtan Yajna. Yajai Sankirtanai Prayar Yajantihi Sumedhasa. Bhagavatam 11.5.32. In this age, the intelligent person completes the performances of all kinds of yajnas simply by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare. Tasmin tushte jagat tushta. When Lord Vishnu is satisfied, all the demigods, or parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are satisfied. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 2nd chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Dakṣa Curses Lord Śiva. Chapter 3, Talks between Lord Śiva and Sati. Maitreya Uvacha, text 1. Maitreya Uvacha, Sadha Vidvishatur Evam, Kalo Vaidriyam Hanayo, Jatu Svashurasayapi, Sumahan Atika Krame. Maitreya continued, in this manner the tension between the father-in-law and son-in-law, Dakṣa and Lord Śiva, continued for a considerably long period. Purport. In the previous chapter has already explained that Vidura questioned the sage Maitreya as to the cause of the misunderstanding between Lord Śiva and Dakṣa. Another question is why the strife between Dakṣa and his son-in-law caused Sati to destroy her body. The chief reason for Sati's giving up her body was that her father, Dakṣa, began another sacrificial performance to which Lord Śiva was not invited at all. Generally, when any sacrifice is performed, although each and every sacrifice is intended to pacify the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, all the demigods, especially Lord Brahma and Lord Śiva, and the other principal demigods, such as Indra and Chandra, are invited, and they take part. It is said that unless all the demigods are present, no sacrifice is complete. But in the tension between the father-in-law and son-in-law, Dakṣa began another yajna performance, to which Lord Śiva was not invited. Dakṣa was the chief progenitor employed by Lord Brahma, and he was a son of Brahma, so he had a high position and was also very proud. Text 2. Yadhabhishikto Dakṣastu Brahmana Paramistina Prajapatinam Sarvesham Adhipatye Smayo Bhavet. When Lord Brahma appointed Dakṣa the chief of all the Prajapatis, the progenitors of population, Dakṣa became very much puffed up. Purport. Although he was envious and was inimical towards Lord Śiva, Dakṣa was appointed the chief of all Prajapatis. That was the cause of his excessive pride. When a man becomes too proud of his material possessions, he can perform any disastrous act, and therefore Dakṣa acted out of false prestige. That is described in this chapter. Text 3. Ishtvasa bhajapayena Brahmistan abhibhuyacha Brihaspati sabham nama Samhare bhe kratuamam. Dakṣa began a sacrifice named Vajapaya, and he became excessively confident of his support by Lord Brahma. He then performed another great sacrifice named Brihaspati Sabha. Purport. In the Vedas, it is prescribed that before performing a Brihaspati Sabha sacrifice, one should perform that sacrifice named Vajapaya. While performing these sacrifices, however, Dakṣa neglected great devotees like Lord Śiva. According to the Vedic scriptures, the demigods are eligible to participate in yajnas and share the oblations, but Dakṣa wanted to avoid them. All sacrifices are intended to pacify Lord Vishnu, but Lord Vishnu includes all his devotees. Brahma and Lord Śiva, and the other demigods are all obedient servants of Lord Vishnu. Therefore, Lord Vishnu is never satisfied without them. But Dakṣa, being puffed up with his power, wanted to deprive Lord Brahma and Lord Śiva of participation in the sacrifice, understanding that if one satisfies Vishnu, it is not necessary to satisfy his followers. But that is not the process. Vishnu wants his followers to be satisfied first. Lord Krishna says, Mad Bhakta Puja Bhyadika. The worship of my devotees is better than worship of me. Similarly, in the Śiva Purana, it is stated that the best mode of worship is to offer oblations to Vishnu, but better than that is to worship the devotees of Krishna. Thus, Dakṣa's determination to neglect Lord Śiva and the sacrifices was not fitting. Text 4. Tasmin brahmarsayo sarve devarshi pitra devata asankritas vatyananas tatpatnyascha sabhartraka. While the sacrifice was being performed, many brahmarshis, great sages, ancestral demigods, and other demigods, their wives, all very nicely decorated with ornaments, attended from different parts of the universe. Purport. In any auspicious ceremony, such as a marriage ceremony, sacrificial ceremony, or puja ceremony, it is auspicious for married women to decorate themselves very nicely with ornaments, fine clothing, and cosmetics. These are auspicious signs. Many heavenly women assembled with their husbands, the Devarshis, demigods, and Rajarishis, in the great sacrifice named Brihaspati Sabha. It is specifically mentioned in this verse that they approached with their husbands, for when a woman is decorated nicely, her husband becomes more cheerful. The nice decorations, ornaments, and dress of the wives of the demigods and sages, and the cheerfulness of the demigods and sages themselves were all auspicious signs for the ceremony. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 5 on Monday. Were there any comments or questions from the devotees before we conclude?
Prabhu.
Yes, Ananda Krishna Prabhu.
This is very important and finish praising find on text 3. Thus Dakṣa determination to negligent Lord Śiva in the sacrifice was not fighting.
Yes.
This is started war between and the Dakṣa and the Lord Śiva.
Yes, definitely a very important part. Like Srila Prabhupada said in the purport, that the Shastra says that yes, the worship of Vishnu is very high, but the worship of Krishna's devotees is even higher. So the mood of the Vaishnavas and the mood of any sincere soul who is trying to truly and genuinely please Krishna or Vishnu cannot ignore his devotees. Krishna won't accept that, that will not be pleasing to Krishna. Rather, they have to focus all their energy on trying to serve the devotees. So in this way, Dakṣa was not correct. He was trying to please Vishnu directly by the sacrifice, and he ignored Śiva, who is, it's said in the Shastras, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, that Śiva is the greatest of the Vaishnavas, not only a normal Vaishnava, but he is the greatest of the Vaishnavas. He is the greatest servant of Vishnu, the greatest servant of Krishna. So, not good to ignore the Vaishnavas. We have to serve them. Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Prabhu. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai.
Jai.
Glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhaktivedanta Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Nishangapuri Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur
Jai.
Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath
Jai.
Puri Dham Ki Jai,
Jai.
Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai,
Jai.
Ganga Mai, Yamuna Mai ki jai.
Jai.
Vrindavan Dharam ki jai.
Jai.
Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dharam ki jai. Sham Kund
Jai.
Radha Kund ki jai.
Jai.
Tulsi Devi, Bhakti Devi, Vrinda Devi ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya ki jai. Scientific
Jai.
Sankirtan Yagya ki jai.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute ki jai. Sri Chaitanya
Jai.
Saraswat Institute ki jai. Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat ki jai. Nitai
Jai.
Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Hari.
Hare Hare Om.
Jai Shrimati Uma Devi Dasi ki jai. Jai Sripad
Jai.
Ananda Krishna Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
श्रीपाद कृष्ण केशव प्रभु जी की जय।
Jai.
Gurudev. Dandavat.
दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभु।
See you tomorrow.
Yes. Jai.